7.3 and 7.4 Physical and Chemical Digestion. Please remember, after you're done studying, go back to the lesson's objectives and make sure that you can fulfill them. Before we know what's physical and what is chemical digestion, we need to remember what is digestion generally. Digestion is the breaking down of food. So, physical digestion is when you break down food from big pieces into smaller pieces, making smaller pieces of the same food. No change in its chemical components. But chemical digestion, this is a chemical reaction in which large food molecules will be broken down into smaller molecules. So now it is a different molecule. Physical digestion does not change again the chemical components of the food, just a big piece of bread turned into smaller pieces of bread, while chemical digestion changes the food molecules into smaller molecules that are soluble in water to allow their absorption later. Mainly physical digestion happens by teeth and the movement of the stomach. When the stomach contracts and relaxes as a muscle, it breaks down food into smaller pieces. While chemical digestion happens by chemical reactions that need catalysts. Who are these catalysts? Remember the catalysts that help in the metabolic reactions? And this type of reaction is a catabolic reaction because it is breaking down. So, who was responsible for this? What was the catalyst? Our biological catalyst, the enzymes. So, as we mentioned before the types of digestion, physical and chemical, let's look into their definitions. Make sure that you memorize the definitions as they are. So, physical digestion, it is when food is broken down into smaller pieces by biting and chewing action of the teeth, and happens also in the stomach and small intestine, where bile breaks down fat and oil. So, this is the definition of physical digestion. Now, what's the function of the physical digestion? Physical digestion increases the surface area of the food for the action of the enzymes in the chemical digestion. So, imagine you have a piece of bread and then you put the enzymes on this piece of bread. The enzymes will be able only to work on the outer surface area. What about the rest of the piece of bread from the inside? The enzymes will not be able to reach it. So how will they reach it? When you break it down into smaller pieces, you will expose more of the surface area of this piece of bread. So, chemical digestion can take place easier and can reach and digest every bit and piece of this piece of food or bread. Chemical digestion breaks down the insoluble molecules into soluble molecules, the big molecules into smaller molecules that can be easily absorbed by the blood. This breakdown happens again by the help of the enzymes. Now, let's follow a piece of food along the alimentary canal and see what happens to this piece of food. First, the food gets ingested through the mouth. Chemical and physical digestion happen here. Physical digestion or mechanical digestion happens by chewing and swallowing. Chewing by the help of the teeth and swallowing by the pressure or the contraction of the pharynx. This part here is called the pharynx. It is a common pathway between the air and the food. Chemical digestion also happens here by the help of the salivary glands that produce saliva that contains amylase enzyme and other enzymes. These enzymes, they work on carbohydrates and fats. And then the food starts moving down the esophagus, reaching the stomach. In the stomach also, we have mechanical and chemical digestion. Mechanical, as we said, by the movement of the stomach that presses the food and mixes it with the hydrochloric acid and the enzymes. Also, the chemical digestion by the help of the stomach enzymes. A little absorption, very little absorption, only for substances like aspirin and alcohol happen in the stomach, but all of the absorption happens here in the small intestine. Okay, and then the food leaves the stomach into the small intestine or the duodenum first. In the duodenum, enzymes are being released from the liver and from the pancreas. So the liver releases bile. Bile is stored in the gallbladder and then released in the duodenum. What is the function of bile? It is physical digestion. It emulsifies fat. What does the word emulsify mean? Emulsifies means breaks down the big fat portion into small fat droplets. Isn't this chemical? No, it's still the same fat, but broken down into droplets of fat. It did not change into another molecule like fatty acids and glycerol yet. Okay? And here happens most of the chemical digestion in the small intestine also, where carbohydrates, fats, and polypeptides and nucleic acid are being broken down chemically. And then all of the absorption happens in the rest of the small intestine, which is the ileum. All of the absorption happens here. The undigested food then moves into the large intestine or the colon, where any extra water is reabsorbed, and then the undigested food, which is now feces, stays stored in the rectum until it can be released outside by the anal sphincter. This is an overview. Let's take a look at the table to revise what we already said. So food is ingested by teeth, lips, and tongue, and teeth start working their physical digestion on any pieces of food that you ingest. And then the salivary glands, they are three pairs. They produce saliva, which is a liquid that contains mucus and amylase enzyme. Food is also mixed with the saliva, and then it forms a small ball called a bolus. So the food traveling from the mouth into the stomach is called the bolus of food. And then teeth grind the food into smaller pieces, and the chewing increases the surface area of food, which is simply the function of physical digestion. The bolus of food travels along the esophagus and with the help of the saliva. Why? Because the water and the mucus lubricate the food and help it slide into the stomach. Then amylase enzyme digests the starch into maltose, which is chemical digestion, because starch is a molecule and maltose is another molecule. So now it changed totally chemically. So this is chemical digestion. Then the food reaches the pharynx. Before going into the esophagus, of course, there is the part in the middle called the pharynx. So the pharynx is a common pathway between the food and the air. So what do we do to ensure that this food does not go into the nose or into the trachea or into the air pathways? So to prevent it from going into the trachea, we have the epiglottis. The epiglottis closes the air pathway when the food is passing through the pharynx. Also, to prevent the food from going into the nasal cavity or the nose, we have the soft palate. This very soft part at the back of your palate. When you put your tongue up into your palate and then move it and slide it at the back, you will find the soft part. This is called the soft palate. It moves and closes the nasal cavity. Then the food finally reaches the esophagus. The esophagus does not do any digestion. It just pushes the food down to the stomach by a process called peristalsis, which is simply contraction and relaxation of the muscles of the alimentary canal to push the food in one direction. The esophagus, as you can see here, is a tube, and any tube has walls and a lumen in the middle. So The lumen of the esophagus is what the food passes through and gets moved into the stomach. After the food moves into the stomach, there is a sphincter muscle at the beginning of the stomach that closes to make sure that when the muscle of the stomach contracts and relaxes, the food does not go back into the esophagus. So after the food reaches the stomach, the salivary amylase stops working because, as we agreed before, salivary amylase has optimum pH that is alkaline. So the stomach, since it's acidic, as we talked about it before, so it will stop or it will denature the salivary amylase. But when the food was still in the esophagus, the amylase was still working on it chemically. Then the food reaches the stomach, which is a strong muscle that contracts and relaxes and breaks down food by this movement, which is, yes, physical digestion, and the liquids of the stomach mix with the food and the food itself turns liquid, and this is what we call the chyme. Now the stomach secretes liquid known as the gastric juice, and anything related to the stomach is always called gastric. Gastric juice contains hydrochloric acid or HCl and pepsinogen. Pepsinogen, this is the liquid that will turn later into the protease enzymes, okay, but after being activated by the hydrochloric acid. So the hydrochloric acid provides the low pH because the low pH, the 2 pH, this is the optimum pH for protease enzyme to work and to digest protein into polypeptides and later into amino acids. So the chemical digestion that turns protein into polypeptides and the physical digestion is what turns the food into the chyme. It is called the churning movement of the stomach. But how does the stomach protect itself from this very acidic medium or the HCl inside it? It protects itself by being covered from the inside by mucus. So the mucus protects the walls of the stomach from this high acidity. It is very important to know that mouth and esophagus and even the rest of the alimentary canal are alkaline media, though the stomach is the only organ that's highly acidic. So the liver, let's remember, is the liver a part of the alimentary canal? No. What's the alimentary canal again? It is the part of the digestive system where the food passes through. So it is not a part of the alimentary canal. It secretes bile that is yellowish green alkaline juice. So it is watery and helps neutralize the acidic mixture from the stomach. So the chyme is coming out of the stomach very acidic, mixed with the 2 pH HCl. Now it went into the duodenum. So it has to be neutralized and returned back into being alkaline. The bile does this work. So it is stored in the gallbladder, and when the food reaches the duodenum, it gets secreted through the bile duct. And when it goes inside the bile duct, it goes finally into the duodenum. And it emulsifies fats and oils. Again, emulsifies means break them down physically into smaller droplets in order to increase their surface area for the work of the chemical digestion. The gallbladder, it's where the bile gets stored until it gets released into the duodenum. Again, it's not a part of the alimentary canal, but it's a part of the digestive system. Pancreas, another gland that secretes digestive enzymes, again alkaline, used for chemical digestion. Food, of course, does not pass through it because it's not a part of the alimentary canal. Pancreatic duct carries the pancreatic fluid from the pancreas to the duodenum. Now, the rest of the small intestine. Again, what's the small intestine? It is a small, hollow, and narrow tube. So, Why do we call it the small intestine? Because it's narrow, not because it's small at all. It's 5 meters long. It's very, very, very long. So the large intestine is actually shorter than the small intestine, but it is wider. So that's why we call it the small intestine, because of its narrow diameter. So the first part of the small intestine is called the duodenum, and the last part is called the ileum. The ileum finally reaches to the colon or the large intestine. The ileum is where the absorption takes place. Okay, so absorption takes place mainly in the ileum of the small intestine, while digestion takes place in the duodenum, or mostly in the duodenum and continues, of course. After the small intestine, we have the large intestine, which is the final part of the alimentary canal, and it's made up of the colon, that is all the large intestine, and then finally the final part is the rectum, where the feces are stored until they are digested. And then we have the anal opening, from which the undigested food exits through the anal opening or gets digested through the anal opening. Okay, these are the enzymes that work through the digestion process. You already know them from previous lessons, of course. Again, a quick revision on the enzymes used in the digestion process. And these are the enzymes that were mentioned in the previous lessons and not mentioned in those tables. So, it's important to remember that the digestive enzymes all work at temperature of 38. Why? Because this is the body temperature. But aren't the body temperature 37? Yes, this is the external body temperature, but from the internal, it's almost 38. And also we have a range of temperatures. But they all vary in their pH. Of course, the stomach has the lowest pH because it contains the hydrochloric acid that is also important to kill bacteria, and the protease enzyme needs this very low pH to work, while the enzymes in the duodenum require pH above 7. That's why the bile and the pancreatic juice neutralize the acidity of the chyme coming from the stomach and return it back to the high pH. So again, all work at the same temperature, all work in alkaline media except for the acidic enzymes of the stomach, and all have high pH except, again, the ones in the stomach that need low pH. Teeth. So what are the different types of teeth that we have? We have incisors. They are used for biting or cutting the food. They are the front ones, and they have sharp edges. They are chisel-shaped teeth. Canines, see this cute vampire here? So remember the canines with the vampires. They are pointed teeth, and they are on the sides of the incisors. Premolars. They are used for grinding and tearing food apart. So they grind food into smaller pieces, and they also tear food apart. They have small grinding surfaces, smaller than the molars. Okay, so the molars here, they have the widest chewing surfaces, grinding and chewing. Okay, so in humans, sometimes we have an extra molar than those two, and it's called the wisdom tooth. It does not grow until the age of almost 18. The person is fully developed. Again, these are the teeth. We have the incisors, the canines, the premolars, and the two main molars, and finally the wisdom tooth. So what is the composition of the teeth? We have the enamel, which is the strongest and the whitest part of the tooth. And then under the enamel, we have the dentin. Inside the tooth, we have the pulp. The pulp is made of the nerves and the blood vessels. In the bottom part of the tooth, we have the cement on the external part instead of the enamel, because it is inside of your jaw. You don't need the strength of the enamel on the roots. Also, the teeth are attached to your jaw by fibers that are attaching the tooth to the jaw. And here you have the jaw bones in which the teeth are embedded. This upper part of the tooth is called the crown, while the part inside of your jaw or inside of the bones is called the root. This is the gum or the gingiva. This is the red part that you can see when you smile. Enamel, outer part, dentin, the layer below, pulp contains the nerves and the vessels. The upper part is the crown, the lower part is the root. Instead of the enamel, we have here the cementum. There is the gum here, as you can see, and these are the jaw bones. This is a quick revision. Now, let's answer some questions. Table 6.1 shows information about some parts of the human digestive system. Here is the table. Name 2 parts of the digestive system where amino acids could be produced by digestion. As you can see here, you have protease and protease. So, the 2 parts of the digestive system where you can digest proteins according to the table are the stomach and the small intestine. Okay? Suggest 2 reasons why starch is not digested in the stomach. So, the stomach cannot digest the starch because the stomach does not contain amylase. Also, the amylase from the mouth gets denatured when it reaches the stomach because of the acidity of the stomach. And finally, you can also say that the stomach contains the 2 enzymes, pepsin and protease or peptidase, and they are not capable of digesting the starch. So these are the reasons, or these are the suggestions that you can write in this question. And this is the mark scheme. Now the question is about the human nutrition. The 3 boxes on the left contains the definitions of the process involved in the human nutrition. The 4 boxes on the right contain the names of some of these processes. Draw 1 straight line from each definition, so from here to the correct process. So how many straight lines you should end up with? Only 3. Please make sure that you draw the right amount of lines, because when he says 1 straight line from the definitions, so I must end up with 3. The movement of digested food molecules into the cells of the body. Into the cells, this is the key word for assimilation. Passing out of food that has not been digested or absorbed as feces through the anus. This is the egestion. The taking of substances, example food and drink, into the body through the mouth. This is ingestion. Now, paper 1 question. The diagram shows an experiment on the digestion of the protein in egg albumin by protease. The protease was taken from human stomach. In which test tube will protein be digested quickly? Look at the different test tubes. Here you have egg albumin and protease. Here you have egg albumin, dilute hydrochloric acid. Here you have egg albumin, dilute hydrochloric acid, and protease. Here you have the same thing but with boiled protease. So, egg albumin and protease, will you have the right pH for the protease to work? No. Here you have the hydrochloric acid. Okay, but do you have the enzyme responsible for the breaking down, which is protease? No. And here you have boiled protease, and enzymes get denatured at 60 degrees. So will this protease be able to digest the egg albumin? No. So the only one that can do the digestion, or the test tube that will contain digested albumin, is the test tube C. Thank you, and I hope this video helps you study.